Adio, adio, querida.
Hey, everybody, this is Chris Carter, Executive Director at Livermore Valley Arts at the Bankhead Theater. And today I am talking to Mostly Kosher. They will be here at the Bankhead on April 23rd at 3 p.m. Looking forward to having him here. You can find out more about tickets online at livermorearts.org. So here we go. Were you at APAP in New York?
Yeah.
I feel like I saw you at some point kind of at a distance, and
I
I
didn't
didn't get a
see
chance to
it.
come say hi. Yeah, I was there.
Great. What do you
How'd it go
think?
for you guys?
Oh man. Well, first of all, I don't know if you heard the news, but we're officially signed with not only are we signed, which is a big deal after 11 years of being on a self-represented artist, but with our target agency, Fly Artists and Matt Greenhill, who is the
Okay.
same representation as the Klezmatics, a flagship Klezmer group, or Yasmin Levy, one of the most famous Ladino singers. Anyway, they're just carrying the same kind of artists that we've always seen as role models. So
Oh, congratulations.
yeah.
That's really good news. I will start by saying I went to ranker.com this morning and I looked up top klezmer bands. Do you know which one was number one?
No.
Mostly Kosher, number one.
Anchor.com.
Right.
What?
That's what I saw. Maybe it was because I was Googling Mostly Kosher beforehand, but
Wait, I'm gonna look
um,
this up.
look
I
it
can't
up.
say that I've
And
Googled that, but
the Klezmatics was number two.
Oh
Um,
my God, you're right.
so
I'm gonna
We're
write to
above.
we're friends with the Klezmatics. I think I should write to them and let them know that we've pushed them down on
We
ranking.
beat Daniel Kahn, David Krakauer, and Golem. Some
What?
and Giora Feidman. These are all like role models of ours.
well, you've made it to the top.
That's
Oh my God.
insane.
Jesus Christ. This is interesting. We beat Andy Statman, and I don't know why Itzhak Perlman is on this list, but we beat Itzhak Perlman.
It's because he did the
John Byron.
it's because it's like Perlman did In the Fiddler's House. That's why.
Wow. Maxwell Street Band. We I'm sorry. This is a complete new news, by the way. Like complete
Oh,
new news.
breaking news.
I am like, what? Oh my
um,
God. That's so funny. Yale.
well, but by the way, so I will just introduce this is Leeav, Sofer, and Janice Markham from Mostly Kosher. And y'all are coming to the Bankhead Theater on Sunday, April 23rd at 3 o'clock, a matinee show. You were here a couple of years ago, pre-pandemic, and I think I told you this before, but this funny story. I had a patron that like afterwards he went to the concert, and afterwards he told me he didn't know what to expect. He thought it was like a comedy show or something just from the title. But he loved it. And he said it was better than what he expected. He had such a good time. And it was a real testament to the performance. So, can you just give me kind of a brief history of klezmer music and the genre, and kind of what are the roots of klezmer music, and where can people hear it nowadays, and kind of what's your take on that?
Janice, go ahead.
Well, the roots of klezmer music. It's funny because of the type of genre that it is, Jewish cultural music, and Jews being a diasporic people, we've been sort of shuffled around from country to country, region to region. It's not a linear line back. It curves. But the genesis of it is in Eastern Europe, in Poland, in Russia, and even Croatia. I mean, all of these regions have also changed name and structure over the years. But the klezmorim were not the classically trained musicians. These were the nomadic musicians, the street musicians. This is the folk tradition of the music. And as often is with folk traditions, it's of the oral tradition. It's the playing in the street, not with a music stand and music. Not all of it was written down. Most of it was learned by ear and was passed from village to village. So there's a very sort of sacred connection with this music because it has deep roots in our culture with these melodies. Um, Leeav often talks about this. Maybe you can speak to this more. The storytelling nature of it, and the extreme joy and tragedy. Do you want to pick it up from there, Leeav?
Well, klezmer, so clay um, is an instrument. The word clay means instrument. Zemer means um, melody. And so it's a Hebrew and Yiddish actually put together. And for context, Yiddish is a Hebrew hybrid language in Eastern Europe of the countries Janice meant. And so klezmer as a word will used to be about general like instrumental music. And it started that way. And instrumental music outside of the synagogue, because as we know, Jewish culture and religion is an interesting, nuanced, fine line as a religious people who also have a culture rather than it being separated. So, these instruments would try to capture the voice of the cantor, the chazan. And the cantor is like, if you don't know, it's like the minister of music, song leader in like the context of like synagogues and prayer. And so these like synagogues vocals were always sometimes they could be mournful depending on the prayer. They could be earnest, I mean, and they were calling out to God. There is the Days of Atonement holidays. There's days of just praising whatever. I mean, if I want to respect all religions here, but for the Jews, it would be respect, praising their divine power of their God and our God. And so this human voice was calling out, and it was leading a long group of people. These instruments are doing a lot to try to mimic that human voice. The violin would, instead of being very accurate, like in classical music, have a lot of slides so that it can emulate the voice sliding up to the note and having a heavy vibrato. The clarinet, another very common klezmer instrument, would have also an element of yearning in it, and would do, even there's techniques you could do in the clarinet that makes it sound like that glottal cry, or a small whining of the voice, even that you can mimic in the way that you play the clarinet. So klezmer, this instrumental music, was birthed also by mimicking that sound that we're familiar with in prayer, but then taking it out of and into a secular context. And it was used for weddings and celebrations a lot. So it's ironic because in the synagogue, you hear kind of minor melodies and minor keys, and it was this prayer and mournful and serious sound. And then klezmer are the first ones to make it joyful without changing the key and the musical mode. So they'd have this very sad musical mode that's the birth of the origin of the sound and the tone. And yet they're doing it like upbeat, really fast, clap your hands. So all of a sudden, this prayerful sound is now a party sound. And that's a lot of why klezmer music is so evocative. It's so of so much of the human voice in instrumental sound. And it is so unique in the way that it's combining this up and down, this sad, this white and black dichotomy of energies and bringing them together. That's one of the things that a lot of cultures don't even have, that nuanced marriage between religion and secular culture in the music so specifically like this. And I just wanted to add too that the Jewish diaspora is huge, and to clarify, diaspora meaning how we've spread out across the world. So klezmer speaks to Eastern Europe, but there's Ladino music from the Mediterranean and Spain. There's Mizrahi music, which is Middle Eastern, like Yemenite music and Iranian Jewish music. And we've Mostly Kosher doesn't even just do specifically only klezmer, although klezmer is a lot of the core of what we do. But a lot of these similar patterns happened even in Ladino music, even in Mizrahi music, and from the Jewish diaspora across the world. But klezmer is definitely what came. There's a huge immigration of these Jews to America, to New York, back in late 19th century and early 20th century. And it started being really well known as, and not stereotyped, but being characteristic of Jews, the Ashkenazi, which is the European Jews in America. And then klezmer started to shape even American music, like Gershwin, Irving Berlin, even Leonard Bernstein. The way they would start composing American music would actually pull Rhapsody in Blue, Gershwin's opening clarinet line, is actually taken specifically from klezmer clarinet technique. So, and that yearning human sound that Gershwin was trying to capture as far as the city of New York is then inherently like Jewish influenced. So anyways, that kind of gives a background of not only klezmer and where the roots and the vibes of it, but then even how it's affecting what we think of as American music today for us Americans, and been influential from across the global spectrum here to an American spectrum as well.
Well, that's got to be the best explanation of klezmer music I've ever heard. And the interview's over now. No, I'm just kidding. Not done yet. No, that was really great.
We've been doing this for a while, and we're still students of all of this.
Yeah.
Like for me, you know, I've been playing music now for 50 years. I've been playing the violin. I just had my half-century anniversary of that. But klezmer music really intensively.
Doesn't look it, does she?
No.
Only since, you know, Mostly Kosher started just a little over a decade ago. So it's been a great journey of scholarship and learning and interviewing and, you know, meeting people and listening to YouTubes. It's been a wonderful elongated college course.
Well, how did y'all kind of come together and form this group? And where does the name come from, by the way? Just who came up with that idea?
I want to give some credit to one of our founders, Mike King, our trombone player, who's like always about the silly. He always personified the joy and silliness in Jewish culture. And we were in university when it started. Janice is an exception to that. I met Janice through synagogue. She played for my mom, who was a cantor in Pasadena. And so Janice and I would play for synagogue gigs and Shabbat shul performances and things as I was even a high schooler. But we started because when I was in university, I was at the music department. I was doing clarinet classical performance and I was doing opera. And as my double performance majors, I would play piano, though. I was multi-instrumentalist, and I'd play piano to get myself through school to pay for a lot of gigs. I played for a wedding in Temple Beth Shalom in Santa Ana, and I did it as every good Jew and musician should be doing. I schmoozed. If you're not familiar with the word, it means you go and you network and you talk.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I talked after the gig, and I was talking to a nice elderly woman who was asking about me and found out I'm Jewish. I'm a clarinet player. So she says, "You're Jewish, you're a clarinet player. You must play klezmer," which I've never played klezmer at that point in my life as like a 19-year-old. And so I said, as every good young budding musician should respond with, "Of course I play klezmer." And she said, "So you must have a klezmer band." And I'm like, "Of course I have a klezmer band." And then she's like, "Perfect. I'm Beverly August. I'm the head of the sisterhood here at the synagogue. We have a big gala next year. We want your band to play." And I was like, "Oh, great."
You better put it together.
Yeah, I literally jumped in the car, called all my university friends that were Jewish, that were in the music department. "Hey, you want to be in my klezmer band?" Klezmer band. Called Janice, who I knew was a violinist. She hadn't played a lot of klezmer before, but she was excited. And then I ran out of Jewish people fast, so I started calling my non-Jewish friends. "You want to be in a klezmer band? What's klezmer? We're going to find out together." But we were university students, most of us, and even though Janice was another generation above me, she was still so hungry to learn new genres and new music. She's done a lot of violin, classical, and rock and roll scenes and like singer-songwriter stuff around LA. And she just was starting to get into Shabbat stuff again because her kids were going to synagogue now, and my mom dragged her in. And so we all kind of prepared it like a recital. We studied the pieces, we studied the Yiddish, and like any good university creative, we were like, "These aren't great enough arrangements. Let's make them better." So we like made our own versions of them. And I was like, we were studying world music. My drummer loved new Latin music and Brazilian Partido Alto Samba. So he's like, "Let's put this over this Yiddish theater song." And we were starting to have fun messing with the music. And when we performed, we didn't even have a band name. We called it the Yiddish Radio Hour because we thought we would build it off of Garrison Keillor's Prairie Home Companion a little bit. Because, Yiddish theater, we thought vintage old, right? Very stereotypical. But as we continued to screw with the melodies, even in the first concert, we would have people being like, this isn't klezmer. Like they were
A bunch of jazz musicians getting together to play klezmer music. So of course we're like, oh, well, we have to have an instrumental solo that basically was in like a jazz format.
Mm-hmm.
We were already, you know, taking the klezmer music that we found that was beautiful roots music, traditional, and we were already starting to kind of take it in a direction that we were familiar with and that we wanted to start creating this sort of mashup kind of thing.
And it sounds that's kind of what your natural instinct was to do.
absolutely.
You needed
Others
to do
would
that.
use the word bastardize. But I will say that once
Pejorative
we,
spin on it.
yeah,
Yeah.
once we did our first concert, we got 6 more calls for gigs after that because there's just not a lot of. Not only is there not a lot of klezmer bands in LA, there's not a lot of bands doing it made up of a young, new, fresh group of
Yeah.
blood and doing new arrangements. So it was quite new for LA. And we had to name the band, and we have some like kind of 60-70% Jews in the band and 30-40% non-Jews. We're doing non-traditional klezmer music that we've already screwed around with. And so we also have this funny joke when you're Jewish, when non-Jews sometimes meet you, they're like, oh, you're Jewish, you must be kosher. And these days secular Jews are like, well, no, mostly, I don't know. So we just thought it's perfect to consider ourselves mostly kosher, as it defines us in more ways than one.
Well, that's a great name. Janice, I saw you play the violin left-handed. Is that right? You're like the Jimi Hendrix of the band. Is it?
I would love to claim that, but in some videos it looks flipped.
Oh, is that what it is? Okay.
So, yeah.
Oh,
I should really start this whole, you know, persona as being the ambidextrous violinist or something, but no, I can't
Oh my
claim
God.
you
have to
should try
show,
it.
you have to show them the picture on your home screen on your phone. Her and her daughter just has this like funny thing they do where they go find those like stock images all over the internet, like for graphic design users.
I
And
don't know
it's
if
like
you can see this.
they look up stock violinists and they're just playing it so wrong and so
I don't know
backwards.
if you could see that, but yeah, my daughter thought
Yeah,
it was
it's all models.
Yeah.
Model's
Like
going,
upside down.
yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
But that being said, Janice is one of the rock stars of the band, because not only is she a great player in her sound, but we pride ourselves on not just being good musicians, which I think we are, as we all have high standards of musicianship, but also entertainer and performers. And we recognize that as 2 separate skill sets. You know, we're individuals that we ourselves get bored when we go see a show and it's just musicians sitting on the chairs and just playing straight. And it's not, we don't disrespect it, but we know that for us, we crave connection with audience. We crave the live experience because, first of all, so much of our music, we're trying to pull people into this. We know it, secondly, that this is new for so many people, and even Jews. American secular Jews are not that familiar with klezmer music. They don't go to these shows very much. It's kind
And
of,
there's actually a historical reason why, to be honest. You know, it's interesting because I know my Jewish education and then my kids, and this is not unusual, they learned music within the temple and they learned Israeli music, Israeli folk music, but there was little to no Yiddish music. The
Yeah.
music that we're playing, klezmer music from Eastern Europe, I think that really stems from, in my view, this sort of post World War II. There was obviously a destruction of culture, not just people, during that time. And it's apt to mention right now because this week, um, in many cultural centers and museums and temples, we're commemorating Holocaust remembrance. And a lot of that music was just disappeared. And there was needing to really be a dependence on these particular musicians in this late 70s, early 80s wave of the Klezmatics and Andy Statman
Hmm.
and all of these sort of luminaries to bring this music back into the fore. But it's taking a while for it to really become pervasive within these institutions that a lot of people are raising their kids and, experiencing Jewish life. So as we've sort of realized this, it's become, I will say, more important. I'll speak for myself, but also I think it definitely can connect to the band, to Mostly Kosher. Important for us as Jews to recognize this music, but the other aspect of it that is so important to us, we've been able to experience in spaces like Disney, is for this music to really be accessible to everyone, to
Yeah.
Jews. It's part of the world music vocabulary.
Yeah.
And the fact that, Jews have lived everywhere, obviously, it makes the music so rich, because Jewish cultural music in Iran is different from that in Argentina, is different from that in Budapest, is different than the music that's in Louisiana.
Well, and you had, Leeav, you made an interesting point, Leeav. It's something I notice as a presenter all the time is the really good artists. It's not just about what they do while they're performing their music. It's like what they do between the songs that really makes a huge difference, and how, like you said, how they connect with the audience, how they tell their story. And those are the ones that people really remember. And I think it particularly, it sounds like you've paid a lot of attention to that. And I'm glad to hear that, because more artists need to really focus on that piece of their performance.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, and it's just interesting. Something that we're doing in the next few weeks, I think I might have told you this, Janice, is we have the Violins of Hope exhibit is coming to our theater at the end of next week, and or coming up this week, I think. It'll be here for a few weeks, and then we will have a series of performances. But I believe there's over 20 violins coming. We're doing this. Actually, it's being done by the East Bay Holocaust Education Center, and we're a sponsor for it. So they're doing all the legwork here and making sure that it happens, and that they're bringing over 20 instruments. There'll be 8 in our lobby, and they'll be also taking some of the instruments to every single school in the region here to do a program, and then they'll have the 3 concerts at the end. And Janice, you told me that you've performed with, I don't know, Leeav, I don't know if you performed with them either, but you performed with these violins in the past. And what was that like, and what should we be expecting?
Well, actually, Mostly Kosher did have the honor of playing at the opening and closing reception at the Soroya Performing Arts Center for the start of the Violins of Hope with Itzhak Perlman. So that was a great honor. Yeah, it was very overwhelming and unexpected to be one of 3 violinists that was in the LA area asked to play these instruments, these violins that were all rescued from different places throughout mostly Eastern Europe. Yeah, it's very hard to describe walking onto the stage and seeing these instruments that had all been restored. Yeah, it was remarkable. The instrument that I played was actually one of the Klezmer instruments, as opposed to one of the classical instruments. And it just had an incredible resonance to it, and it felt like it just felt like history. It felt like ancestry. It really was. I mean, it sounds so cliche, but it felt like there were voices speaking to me that when I picked up the instrument. So it was quite overwhelming, and it's really amazing that this legacy is being taken to different regions throughout the world, and it's part of the Holocaust education that I think prior to the Violins of Hope wasn't really discussed as much, because number one, there was loss of life, and that
Yeah.
is a great tragedy. But along with that, there was the music and the instruments and the artists' lives and work. There was just one super quick note on that. A colleague of ours, Eric Stein, a wonderful musician and presenter in the Toronto area, he's involved in the Gare Mandolin Orchestra. Mandolin orchestras we don't speak of them.
Yeah.
It was an actual genre that was very pervasive, especially in Poland. So to recognize these various art forms and to recognize them, yes, felt very fortunate to be involved in Violins of Hope and the work that they're doing with that project. So I think aren't you having Lindsay Deutsch with you?
Yeah, I
Um,
believe so.
yeah,
Uh,
she's a wonderful colleague
yeah.
and ambassador for the violins. So yeah, that's wonderful that you're having that project.
Yeah, we're really looking forward to doing it and happy to host it. Well, let me get back to your show coming up on the 23rd of April. What can people expect? What are your plans for this performance? Anything you'd like to share?
Well, I think that seeing how it's kind of post COVID or I don't know, people can, that's maybe a polarizing phrase, but I will just say that knowing that we're coming back to live performance, I think that our energy is really going to be about getting a lot of audience participation through the personified joy of this music. So there's going to be a lot of hand clapping and other forms of engagement that we've got planned. If I almost haven't asked you permission yet, but like working out a way that how do we fit a hora in your theater? Um,
Okay.
so it's going to be to that level that we're going to be wanting to really get in with the people.
Wow. Okay.
Um, and
Playing
actually,
our new album, right?
yes, and then also we released a new album back in February uh
Hmm.
22. We had a great success, and we're excited to be touring that album with songs that we did a little bit of this the last time we were there, but we've gone a little bit deeper into themes of connecting this cultural music to current events and what's important to us and our values and mission as artists. And recently it's been about mutual understanding, fighting some disinformation, as well as kind of focusing on even some mental health themes of just understanding in a polarized world two different people and finding that equal ground we can through music, which we believe to be such a universal language. And in that sense, there's so much of our music that, though it is cultural and in other languages, we've translated a lot, or we typically love to do, we've been doing this new thing, whereas before we would take a traditional piece and then rearrange it to be in a new genre, as you heard us when I mentioned the start of the band. Now we're taking quotes or pieces of old folk songs and then deconstructing them and recreating a brand new original song that is incorporating the quote. So it's no longer just a genre mashup, but it's a true original voice meets the old voice, the heritage
Hmm.
voice. So we'll either take a lyrical quote, or we can take a musical melodic quote of maybe the main line of this Klezmer song that then becomes the melody for a new chorus with original, even English words about a social justice theme that has been meaningful for us. So here you have a brand new experiment of how we're creating old and new in that marriage. And we're also, despite that, we'll work out some of our expressed themes that are important to us, still be finding the way to celebrate our humanity and joy by the time you get to the end of it. So if we are successful, you'll be on a ride, a little bit of a roller coaster,
Okay.
and at the end, you'll end up on your feet with a big l'chaim in the air.
Yay. Well, I was listening to some of your music this morning and I could hear some of those themes that you're talking about. It definitely was coming through. And you sing in English and Yiddish, is that right?
And Hebrew
And Hebrew?
and even Ladino.
Mhm.
Okay.
So we definitely are ready to expose people to all of the diaspora a little bit. It's definitely I want everyone to know we're not here just to play for your local Jewish community. Although of course we're so loyal there, we would appreciate loyalty there. But this is a show that is directed towards immersifying, or that's my new word, immersing people into the culture, reminding people of the secular roots as well as our spiritual roots as a people, and as a global roots sound, as a true world music, not just uh, we don't we don't consider ourselves in the Grammys under the Christian rock section.
Yeah.
where this is a global roots sound that we can't wait to bring to your community.
Wow. Well, we're super excited. I really want to thank you for your time. And I enjoyed getting to know you better, and I'm looking forward to seeing you. So for anybody that's watching this and they want to get tickets, April 23rd at 3 p.m., you can go online at livermorearts.org and grab your tickets to Mostly Kosher.
I'll also add that, this show will be great for adults, but also it'll be intergenerational friendly. Even though it'll maybe be a longer show because we'll have our 2 sets with an intermission, it should still be, at least for older kids, if you have kids, you think you can make it through, it's going to be a lot of fun for families. There's enough engagement and audience interaction that they're going to, whether they even got all the layers of the themes, they're going to have had a really fun time. So just encourage people to keep that in mind.
All right. Thank you.